Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at loops in C++. So we're going to go ahead and create a new file called loops.cpp. We use loops when we want to repeat a certain piece of code multiple times. So there are two basic types of loops in C++, and that is a while loop and a for loop. So these are the two different type of loops. They both have their own purpose, but first let's look at their syntax. So for the while loop, its syntax is going to be while, and in parentheses we're going to have condition. Then we're going to have a certain piece of code. So how does this work? The condition is checked, and if the condition is true, then the piece of code is going to get evaluated. The same works for the for loop, so it only has a different syntax. So it's going to be for, and first we're going to have a variable initialization followed by a semicolon. Then we're going to have our condition, and finally we're going to have an increment or a decrement based on our program. So that is how we create a for loop and a while loop. So when we usually know how many times that we want our loop to run, that means we should probably use a for loop. But when we don't know beforehand how many times our loop is going to run, we should probably use a while loop. So in code we're going to see both of them. So we're going to put in our template #include iostream, and we're going to have our main function. And inside here, first we're going to just print out while loop just to show which one is the while loop and which one is the for loop. We're going to print out while loop followed by 2 new line characters just for readability purposes. And now we're going to have our while loop. Before we start our while loop, we need to initialize a certain variable. Let's just call it a, and we're going to set it equal to 0. And our while condition is going to be while a is less than or equals to 5. We want this piece of code to execute. In this case, we just want to print out the value of a each in a new line. So it's going to be std cout, and we want to print out a followed by a new line. If we just ran it as it is now, it would go infinitely. That is because a is always going to be 0, which is always going to be less than or equals to 5. So when we're using while loops, we need to increment our condition variable. So we need to increment a by 1 each time. So a++ is a special syntax that is going to increment our variable by 1. So this is going to be our while loop. So here, the first loop is going to be a equals 0, then we print it out, then we add 1 to a, then a becomes 1, and it continues all the way until a equals 5. And when a equals 5, it gets printed out, then a becomes 6. When a becomes 6, the condition inside the while loop is broken, so our while loop stops. So this is going to print out the numbers from 0 to 5. So we can write this in a for loop as well. So that is what we're going to see now. So we're going to have for, and first we said we have a variable initialization. So it's going to be int b equals 0. In while loop, it's outside the while loop, but when we're using for loops, it's inside the for loop, the variable initialization. Then we're going to have our condition, which is the same as the above, which is going to be b less than or equals to 5. And finally, we want to increment the b variable. So it's going to be b++. As you can see, the for loop is much more compact than the while loop because everything is inside the for loop in one line. So in here, we want to print out the same thing. So we're going to copy and paste it. And we're going to replace the a variable by b. In for loops, we do not need to increment the variable because we already did that when we wrote the for loop first. So here again, we're going to print for loop just for readability purposes. We're going to print for loop over here. We're going to print for loop and we're going to save our file. And now it should print out the same thing for both loops. So we're going to compile our file, which is loops.cpp, and we're going to run it. As you can see, both loops print out the numbers from 0 till 5. So this is the basics on how you can use loops in C++. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more daily programming videos.